There sure are a lot of new card games these days. This one, that one, these ones, those ones. It's hard to keep track of them all. So many games have popped up on Kickstarter in the past year, and I only have one question. How do these games actually play? I don't care about how collectible the game is, or how many exclusive green Ks you can put on a card, or how shiny the cardboard is. Okay, maybe I care about that one a little. But I want to know what these new games actually play like. So I decided to do a gauntlet of learning a new game every day for the past week. And I'm here to tell you what I found. All of the main websites and discords for these games are in the description if you want to know more about any of them. And there's definitely plenty more games than what I cover here. So if you end up liking the video, smash that like button and tell me what games should be next. So let's jump, hop, and skiddly-doo right into our first game. I started the week off on Sunday playing Polywog, a creature collector type game with evolving polywogs. It kind of reminds me of old Yu-Gi-Oh! With some elements of Pokemon mixed in there. You play polywogs on top of battle pads, evolve them to higher levels, mutate them with new abilities, and then use them to attack your opponent's polywogs or hit them in the face if they have none out. This is also a life decking game, so when you get hit in the face, you have to put cards from your deck into the Forgotten Zone. Not the discard pile, the Forgotten Zone, which is this game's banished or exiled pile, which is a little bit of a spin on the normal life decking, send cards to the graveyard mechanic that
generally isn't too highly regarded.
When attacks aren't going face, the attacking polywog deals its damage to the defending polywog, and the damage persists through turns, and you need to track it with dice or something. It could be extra copies of rule books or something, I'm not judging. The resource system is also a little different. Every turn you get 2 polyrads, which can be used to play more expensive cards, or you can convert a polyrad into a card draw as many times as you want. There are also cards that cost more than 2 polyrads, meaning you'll have to play cards that increase the amount of polyrads you get, and a lot of those cards give the polyrad increase to both players. It'll be interesting to see how that mutates, which is another card type. They're like equipments. Boom, got them. Then you have your Pokemon trainers, polywog keepers that are like spells, one-off effect type things. And yeah, that's about it. So what did I think about it? I think the art is really cool, and the theme of a slowly expanding mutation to different species is really neat. I also think the base gameplay is pretty solid, except it kind of has the same problem that old Digimon games and I assume old Pokemon had, where if you have a Seacroak, a stage 3 Polywog in your hand, it's basically a dead card unless you have a Frelp already in play, and to get the Frelp in play, you have to have a Kelpole in play. If you're missing any of the cards in the chain, the other ones are just useless in your hand except for the base form, Kelpole. There were a lot of turns in the games I played where I couldn't do anything because I either didn't have a stage 1 Polywog, didn't have the correct evolution card to put on a Polywog, or everything I had costed more than 2 polyrads and I didn't draw the cards that would give me more. I had 25 cards in my hand at one point and I couldn't play anything. So I feel like this could be a deck building issue that could possibly be minimized since I was just playing a starter deck. There were also a couple of cards that just seemed like they were too good, like they'd be staples in every single deck. So I'd really like to jump back into the pond at some point and explore the deck building further. If you want to see me and Ben trading cards as games, there's a link in the description, or maybe, one of those things right here. And as far as getting this game right now, it's already past Kickstarter, but you can get some of the past holiday sets, pins, and a plush on the website, as well as pre-orders for the first edition of the first set. There's also been a lot of drama about the Kickstarter funds and whether or not that's happening, but I don't have time to explain all that. I have more games to cover, so yeet! On Monday, I played Silver Wings Legacy, which is kind of cheating because I played this one before, but I'm throwing it on here anyway and you can't do anything about it. This is a comic book inspired fighting style card game where you take control of a main character, or MC, and throw their friends at your enemies until they run out of stamina. In this game, you'll be tossing out ally cards of a certain color, and your opponent will either have to block with an ally card that matches the attack's color, block with 2 ally cards that don't match, or, well, take the damage. There's a lot of effects about what happens when things attack and block that make it more than a color matching game though. There's also one-shot effect support cards, field cards, and hidden support Yu-Gi-Oh style trap cards in the mix. Every character also has a signature attack or skill that you can bring to the game as a one-time bonus for that extra push or last-ditch defense. This game doesn't really have a numbered resource system that goes up over the course of the game. Instead, the main currency is that sweet card advantage, baby. Every round in this game, your hand refills instead of drawing just one card, and you can attack once with each of the 3 colors, so deciding what to keep in reserve and what to shoot out as an attack becomes a neat mind game. The round doesn't end until both players have decided they have nothing left to do, so if you blow your load too early, you could be in for a world of hurt. And that's pretty much this game's mechanics. It's simple, yet it still has some of that strategery. It flows pretty nicely from phase to phase, and you get to draw and play a lot of cards. The hero, anti-hero, and villain archetypes all have slightly different game plans and want to hit you in different places. Previously, I felt like you could draw all support cards and just get absolutely decimated, but this test I played with a more tuned deck and it really wasn't an issue. I do think the signature attacks all kind of do the same thing right now, where most of them just do a bonk and if you block it then something bad happens, but the game is still shifting around right now, so that'll probably change. Silver Wings Legacy should be entering a test beta soon, so join the Discord and watch out for that. Next. Oh boy, I've wanted to play this one for a while. I saw the game board and the cards and I was like, bro, this is insane. There are numbers and counters everywhere. This is gonna be the most complicated card game I've ever learned in my life. Even more complicated than 7th Sea. And then I had it down after one game. And that's not a flex, like I have some huge giga brain or something. The game is actually pretty simple once you get into it. It's another fighting style game where you play as a sci-fi guardian frame Spartan and shoot, stab, and zap your opponent until their health hits 0. To get to their health, you'll need to eat through their shield first though, and to do that you'll probably need gun. And also ammo. Yeah, you heard me. Ammo. The resource system in this game is storage energy, which you can get by exiling a card from your hand, which you can do once per turn. Storage energy is a pool that refills every turn, so as you exile more cards, your power grows. As your power grows, you'll start to be able to play abilities and weapons, like, as I said before, guns and ammo. But the ammo doesn't get used. It's almost like a Pokemon energy. Once you have your weapon ammoed up, you can start doing the shooting, and that means you'll need to start doing the rolling. Yeah, in this game you gotta roll 2d6 dice to determine if your weapon connects with the enemy. Every hero has an armor rating, and every gun has a targeting rating, and you need to roll at least the difference to hit and do the damage. There's also hero weapons and signature weapons. These don't need ammo, and they're strong as heck. The ice character Veil's signature weapon can freeze the opposing character, which makes all of Veil's other weapons do more damage for the turn. Also, it can double its damage by destroying 2 storage energy. Not spending, destroying. That's another interesting mechanic in this game. Some effects do that, including the big Super Saiyan move, V-Trigger! Every character can V-trigger by destroying a certain amount of storage energy, becoming stronger, drawing more cards every turn, and activating all V-trigger abilities. The frozen double damage on Veil's gun is a V-trigger ability, so it's pretty good, you should do it. There's also your one-off effect type abilities that stay around that you can activate every turn, your face-down trap abilities that you activate on your opponent's turn, weapon mods that increase weapon stats, vitality cards that improve your character stats, armor, and a mechanic to regenerate some of your shields by destroying a storage energy. That's everything, I think. I think having dice rolls being such a main mechanic is gonna be rough. It's gonna be an uphill battle to people that like TCGs because a lot of them don't like dice. It's an extra element of randomness, and you already have a good amount of randomness from having the shuffled deck. Going past that, I feel like there was definitely potential to make some big combo plays where you throw out an ability or two to disrupt and then go in with your arsenal for, hopefully, massive damage. I also thought the signature weapons were absolutely required. Some of the characters' V-trigger abilities basically only worked if they had their signature weapon, which you need to draw, and you can only have one copy of it in your deck. That's still a good meme, right? Most of the basic guns I saw did 2 or 3 damage. The signature weapons I saw did 5 and 7 damage, not counting their abilities. I still think this is worth looking into, especially if you want something a little bit outside of the usual TCG affair. You know, I only played a couple games, I could be missing something, I gotta jump back in it. The devs also have a bunch of stuff planned for different modes, like a raid boss PvE mode and some kind of grid-based mode, so it'll be interesting to see how it evolves, and hopefully they don't end up stretching themselves too thin. Vanquishers has a Kickstarter coming up soon on September 13th, so check them out. I went into this one thinking, okay, I'm gonna play the rock game today, because a lot of the cards are like stones with runes on them, but then this thing was like, awesome. It's another fighting style card game. Maybe I should have spaced these out different. You play as a runeslinger and sling runes. The goal of this game is to burn the other runeslinger's power to 0 from 5. You burn a power by either decking them out, then their discard gets shuffled back into their deck, reducing their health to 0, and then it resets to their max HP, or inflicting a certain number of ailments on them, and then the ailments disappear. Ailments are the most unique aspect of this game, I feel. They act as stacking debuffs that do nasty things like lower your defense or deal damage whenever more of that debuff is applied. There's 6 different ailments and 2 levels of each one depending on how many stacks you have of a certain one. There are cards that inflict specific ailments, but also cards that just tell you to inflict an ailment, so you can kind of pick and choose what you want to do. Other than the ailments, you have your usual attack and defensive kind of spells, along with a specific ability and stance that go with your class. The other cool thing I think this game does is the resource system. Once per turn, you can put a card from your hand face down as a concentration, and you can tap your concentration cards to produce light, which is your resource to play cards. Cards you play go on top of the concentration cards. Even if an effect resolves immediately, the card does not leave your board until the end of the turn. So concentrations not only act as a stockpiling resource system like Duel Masters, but also kind of act like an action point system where you can only play as many cards as you have resources in a turn. Boom. Mind blown. I don't think I've seen anything like that before. Some cards stay on the field indefinitely or until you use them, and as long as they're on the board, the concentration they're on top of is eaten. It's not usable because there's something on top of it. You know, it just works. There's also a card type called a boon, which is kind of funny. You put it on top of an ailment like a band-aid, and you can ignore that ailment until the boon gets destroyed. Oh no, Roman, you're looking a little
insane.
Here, this rock will make you feel better. Any card that stays on the board can be attacked if you have some kind of effect that lets you do it, so there's more to sling at than just the face. Picking when to destroy other cards on the board becomes a really tough decision. Another tough decision is how I write the transitions between explaining the game mechanics and what I think of them. I need to go back to this one, because the rock game rocks. At least from the perspective of only a few games. I want more. The 3 different ways to burn power all seem viable. There's no class restrictions on cards, you can play any cards, so deck building is basically wide open. I could see that potentially being a downside once a best deck is found, but hopefully with there being a couple different avenues for victory, the best deck is a bit harder to find. I feel like this hits some of the same brain receptors as Flesh and Blood for me, but I think I've already enjoyed this game more than Flesh and Blood. I can draw cards in this game. Sorry, Fleefy Floofers, I tried. You can definitely get wombo comboed out. I think I took 17 damage one attack, but then I turned around and decked out my opponent, and that was basically the same amount of work towards the win state of the game. And that's kinda wild. I guess rocks might be a hard sell thematically though if most of your cards are inanimate things. They are very pretty rocks though. The game is already past Kickstarter and should hit the market in November. They do have some print and play files on their website though, as well as the tabletop simulator that every other game on here has had so far. Next. On Thursday I played OMNI and it was an interesting one. In this game, both players have crystals that act as life totals and you need to destroy them in order to win the game. You do this by summoning souls from a Yu-Gi-Oh style extra deck and equipping them with quirks that increase their stats, and then attacking your opponent's souls and their crystals. The quirks are more than just equipment though. They all have an Evo value that you can use to ascend your soul into a more powerful entity when it's equipped with enough stuff. Every soul in existence has 3 stats: attack, health, and armor. When something attacks, it deals its attack to the defender's armor, and then health if it runs out of armor. Armor is basically just health bar number 2, but there are cards that interact with it differently. Damage is also persistent through turns, so you'll have to keep track of it. When you first start the game, you only have access to half of your board and 1 crystal, but once you ascend to your first soul, you unlock the other half of the board, get another life crystal, and stick another soul in the new area so you can start the ascension process all over again. Once you've obtained your second crystal, the next turn you can combine your crystals to the center of your board and make a perfect soul. The perfect soul can then be combined with 2 existences, which are the upgraded souls, to form a crystal guardian, which is the ultimate defender of your life with all of the stats in the whole world. While you're trying to climb this evolutionary ladder, you'll be defending yourself by playing soul tokens. Once per turn, you can discard a card from your hand and throw down one of these little buggers who basically exist to eat damage because they have to be attacked before the things behind them on the board can be attacked, as long as they're on the same side of the board. Left defends left, right defends right, and the middle 2 defend the center. You can also do some other shenanigans using events, which are your usual spell type cards. Some of them stick around on the board, some of them are instants, and some of them you place face down and activate on your opponent's turn. Woohoo! I think that about covers everything. This game has a slightly different flow than usual with the heavy use of the existence deck, which I find is pretty neat. I like climbing from one level to the next and deciding which of the next level I should throw out depending on the board. The art is mostly placeholder right now, but the art they do have done is pretty darn cool. It's very unique and has a distinct style. I think the game though might go a little too much into random rules that you need to remember. The phases of every turn are very simple and clear, but the ascension process is kind of this long chain that you just have to remember. Souls make existences, and the first one unlocks the second half of the board, which immediately makes a soul. Once you have 2 crystals, next turn you can cluster your crystals to make a perfect soul in the crystal guardian slot, even though it isn't a crystal guardian, but it can become a crystal guardian once you've combined it with 2 existences. If you ascend a soul, it goes back to your existence deck, but you can't use it as your second soul if you just ascended for the first time. Your deck also must have 15 events and 15 quirks. Your existence deck has to have exactly 4 soul tokens, 5 souls, 8 entities, and 2 crystal guardians. It's just a lot of random numbers and seemingly arbitrary rules that you're gonna have to remember. In the couple games I played, most of the time the second you get ahead, you can just kind of stay there. Drawing is pretty limited in this game. You start with 3 cards in your hand and you only draw 1, and a good chunk of the time you'll be using a card to make a soul token so it can block an attack. There's a soul that lets you draw 2 cards every turn, and it feels really good to have that thing out there, especially when every card in the deck is a one-of. That's right, singleton baby. So it seems like the chance plays a pretty big part in what kind of cards you're gonna get, and you can't really build for consistency. This snowball can get real big real fast if you draw the right cards. The first game I ever played, my opponent didn't even get to his second crystal before he got donked. And getting your second crystal basically doubles everything you can do. More attacks, more spots to play events, and double your life total. I think it's a really neat game that just needs some more play testing and ironing out maybe. They had a Kickstarter earlier this summer but withdrew it to refine the game. It should be reappearing in the not too distant future though. They also periodically have some test decks that appear on their website, so whenever those pop up you can grab some of them. Next game on my list. You know the old Naruto card game? Well, it was canceled 9 years ago, so probably not. But someone didn't forget. They said, what if Naruto, but more now? And that's Primal. In Primal, you'll be playing characters ranging from monsters to waifus, putting them into teams, and swinging them at your opponent while abilities and stuff fly everywhere. Winning battles will injure your opponent's characters, changing their stats, and uncontested battles against your opponent directly will get you battle rewards, cards from your opponent's deck, and when you get 10 battle rewards, you win the game. This game is pretty familiar as a summon creatures, they attack your opponent can block kind of game, but the way it goes about it is pretty unique. The main resource in this game is the turn counter. It starts at 0 and goes up at the end of your turn. Cards have turn counter requirements to be played, so as the game goes on longer, more powerful cards can be played. That's not the only balancing factor here though. There's quite a few actually. You can only play 1 character and 1 strategy card per turn, and sometimes they have a hand cost where you need to put a card from your hand with the matching element into the essence zone, where they can be used as fuel for battle trick abilities later. You can put character cards into teams where their powers are combined and they attack and defend as one. The top character uses their first number, and up to 2 backup characters use their second number to compute the full strength of the stack. When characters take damage, they become injured, turning sideways, changing their stats, and possibly losing their abilities unless they have a specific keyword that lets them keep them. A few characters even get stronger when they get hurt. If an injured character gets hurt again, they dead, bro. After you've played your character and your strategy, which is just your usual spell type card, you can attack with up to 3 of your teams, and your opponent can decide to block with their own teams or not. If they do decide to block, the defender can also reorganize the members of the blocking team in case one of them needs to be the sacrificial Micromon. After that, there's an ability phase where players can go back and forth using ability cards, paying for them using the cards from their essence area. Once everyone is done, all the abilities resolve in the opposite order they were played, and then the combat resolves. I think that's pretty much everything though, so what do I think about it? The Naruto card game system must have been pretty decent. The game lasted for 7 years, so this game has a pretty solid foundation. It's just all up to how you balance the cards you create. There's definitely some good decisions on what to play, how to arrange your teams, and what cards to use for costs. I've actually played this game a bit more than the rest of these, and I had some pretty intense games that could go either way. And I've also had some non-games where if you ever miss a character drop, you're a little in trouble because it's a once per turn thing. There's also this dragon, Balthazar, who has an effect where every turn you can reveal your opponent's hand and the top 3 cards of their deck, discard any one of those, and then put 2 back on top of the deck in the order that you choose. If the other player doesn't already have a way to deal with Balthazar on the board, then you're not gonna draw a good card for the rest of the game. Oh, and this thing comes out on turn 3, by the way. You do have to specifically transform a drag inked Sophie you have into it, which is just a mechanic where you swap a character you have in play for its transformation without eating your once per turn character, but it's not that hard to accomplish. There's a lot of really strong effects in the game so far, but this one seems like the most ridiculous one I've seen. Other than that, I've had a pretty good amount of fun playing it. The game has a Kickstarter launching in August, and you can buy the 0th edition starter decks on their website. They'll even send you a couple of gold foils if you just sign up for their newsletter. I want to see what the first set brings. Believe it. Ugh. Finishing off my list is this very uniquely themed game about 2 theater troupes putting on a show trying to outdo each other to obtain 10 audience members before the other. You'll be playing cast members, giving them props for extra stats and abilities, and messing things up with spell-like cue cards. The win condition of this game, the audience, is also your main resource, with cast and props needing a certain audience size to play. Much like Primal, you're limited to playing 1 cast member and 1 prop per turn. Once you've played all your cards, you can decide to either put on a show or steal the show. Putting on a show will have you bowing a number of your cast members to grab the attention of audience members in the foyer. These audience members will then be moved to your side of the board and become captivated for a turn, which means they cannot be stolen from you. If your opponent has audience members that are not captivated though, you may attempt to steal the show instead. When you go to steal the show, there's a zone on the board called Center Stage where you'll need a cast member. This member will use their performance value to try and outperform the other theater. You can use additional cast members to support the steal with their own performance values. Your opponent can do the same thing. Every ability in this game is at instant speed, meaning you can do it on your opponent's turn, so a steal could go back and forth in a battle of extravagance, showmanship, and tomfoolery! When all of the heckling is complete, if the stealer has a bigger number, they succeed and take as many audience members as they can with the remaining performance value after the competition. If the stealers lose the show, their center stage cast member is shamed off of the spotlight, opening their theater up to a steal from their opponent next turn. There are also aristocrat cards that are played over audience members for a specific cost. Normal audience members can be taken with 1 performance value, but Arnold the Obstinate and Unimpressed needs 5 performance value to be stolen, so aristocrats can beef up your defenses for the showboaty types, and maybe they can do some other wild things too. The draw phase also presents you with a choice every turn. You can draw 2 cards, or you can draw 1 card and make a new audience member in the foyer. Some decks will probably want to just take audience members from the foyer, and some would probably rather steal them from their opponent. That's about all the basic mechanics though, and I sure think a way about them. The theme of this game is super cool. The 4 different troops are all pretty distinct. The fiery Circia with their legions of acrobats and demons that want to go fast. The sanguine, the undead types that definitely don't kill their audience members and do graveyard deck type things. The grandiose musicians and divas that ramp into unstoppable bands of greatness. And the morphos, your bunny in the hat musicians that also might just ruin your plans. You got your waifus, you got your monsters, you got your robot musician bugs. I mean, what else could you ask for? The game is surprisingly simple to describe, but even in a few games I was already trying to decide what I was going to do on the draw step. Do I draw 2 and attempt to steal the show or set up for a big next turn? Do I draw 1 and get more audience members that I can take that won't be stolen next turn? And that's just the first phase. All of the abilities being reactable with your abilities means there's a lot of room for counterplay. It did seem like going into the last turn on the games that I played that you could already see who was going to win or lose and there wasn't really much you could do about it. But hey, that's off a couple of games with the starter decks. There's a whole playtest team for this game and apparently they're already testing for sets in the future, so it's at least a little reassuring that this game is actually being tested by multiple people. Wager of Troupes is going to have a Kickstarter soon TM, and they've already had a couple of promos in the past on Patreon, but I don't think they have anything going on at the moment but some print and play decks you can find on their Discord. Sayonara! And with that, I have completed 7 games in 7 days. This turned out to be a lot more than I initially thought when I had this idea, but I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something about a game or two while you were here. Again, I just learned all of these games and kind of made a first impression after a couple matches, so my opinion at this point is not super concrete. None of these games made me go bleh, I hate this. So I think I'm gonna return to all of these games and dig a little deeper to see if they hold up on further inspection, so watch out for that. Is there any one of these in particular you'd like to see expanded upon first? Let me know in them comments. All of these games' websites and discords are in the description of this video. Go fill your eyeballs with their cardboard pictures. I'm 2 Lanes, the card game Crypt Man, and I'm out.